Saw X, or as my friend Kurt was saying, can we call this Socks? Yeah, okay, so we're on Saw 10, friends, and now it's time for me to get into the spoilers. I've taken a couple days to process what I saw and what I didn't see, because there were a lot of parts where I did actively look away, and as Uptown Duck said in the car review, which if you haven't seen is my immediate takeaway from the movie with no spoilers. So spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. And if you want no spoilers, please head on over and check that one out. I giggled a lot during these brutal, brutal moments where I couldn't look at what was happening. And I was giggling because I knew what was happening, because I could still hear what was happening, and it just sounded so ridiculous. And I didn't look because I knew it was going to happen. So the main thing that I really want to talk about, I think, with Saw X, we're going to get into some of the traps and how I felt about those, because I think some of them were done really, really well. Mad props to everyone that's working on special effects on this movie, because although I didn't look obviously at everything I did see looked amazing. So I do want to say great job there. And this is in no way me trying to say that the gore is not good in the movie. That's not what we're talking about. I just want to talk about the way that gore is used in movies. This is a storytelling issue for me. And ultimately, what it boils down to is the stakes, right? So for me with a horror film, what I want to feel is I want to feel compelled to not be able to look away. I want to feel like I have to look at what's happening, even though I don't want to see what's happening. This film for me just has moments where it does that, but has lots of moments where it doesn't deliver. I just know what's gonna happen, and a lot of the times I am correct, and that isn't rewarding. I want to be on the edge of my seat. I think that's something that Saw 1, the very first Saw that we had in 2004, did so well. Even when I rewatched it, which I'm also gonna be doing actually it might be up now, a retro review on Saw 1, and sort of talking about my feelings about that movie and if it holds up still today in 2023. But one of the things that I really loved about that movie is that you're on the edge of your seat. This film just doesn't do that. At least not for me. It doesn't do that. If it does that for you, great. I'm glad. I'm happy for you. But for me, what it's missing is, I think the thing with Saw 1 is that you have a whole day to play the game. So the game isn't just about someone doing something terrible. In fact, a lot of it, when the terrible stuff happens, is actually more about the reactions to it than it is about what's happening. This is more about the awful, brutal things that are happening. The fact that you have to do brain surgery on yourself, and what does that look like, and how brutal it is. Cutting off your own leg with a Geely saw, and how brutal that is. The gore of that. Not to say the acting in this movie isn't great, because it is. With Saw 1, you have a whole day for these characters to deal with. Do I do this awful thing? Do I shoot this person that I just met? Do I cut off my foot or not? And you get to watch them on the journey through that. Because in Saw 10, everyone has 3 minutes, and this is my issue with, I think, Saw just as it went on as well. The fact that it just became about, like, how many traps can we fit in the movie? How gruesome will the traps be? And because it's how many traps can we fit in the movie, the time limits become so small. So the time limit's on the traps, right? So giving someone 3 minutes to saw off their leg and suck bone marrow out of their leg and spit it into a thing is, like, not reasonable, I think. I don't know. Maybe it is reasonable. I'm not a medical professional, but I just don't think that makes sense. And I feel like in Saw 1, the fact that we kind of got hours of someone having to deal with the reality, someone not having all the pieces of the puzzle as well. So in Saw X and in a lot of the later Saws, they tell you exactly what the rules are of the game. They say, here's what you have to do. And in the first Saw, the game that we see with Larry and Adam, they don't really know what they have to do. They are told they have everything to get out. That's all they're told. They have to solve the puzzle of why they're there and how do we escape and who is this person to me, and figure all of that out. So it's a journey that we get. And I want to go on that journey with the actors. I want to see them putting the pieces together and realizing, oh my God, I have to do this terrible thing. And I want to see the moment where they break. And because it's 3 minutes, One, everyone always wastes the first bit freaking out, and then there's a moment where they break, right? But it's all happening a lot faster, so we miss out on a lot of the beats in between. And that is, for me, what I think is fun to watch. Now, I also have to acknowledge that when I'm watching these movies, I am also watching it from the perspective of an actor. So, of course, for me, a lot of the fun of watching these films is seeing the journey and being taken on that journey along with the characters. But I also think that's what makes horror scary, is the reactions to the horror, not necessarily what's happening. And sometimes what you don't show is more powerful than what you do show. And this is a franchise that I feel like has lost some of that magic that they had when they were constrained by a budget, you know? Like, I think the first Saw was made for 1.2 million. And so they had to think about, like, how do we do what we want to do? A lot of that movie is also in one room. And a lot of the things that I didn't like about this movie is that at the end, when we get to the final trap, I do think the premise of the movie is really good. But when we get to the final bit with John trying to get revenge on these scam artists who, you know, they did this whole hoax, and he's trying to get back at them, not for himself as well, just for everyone. You know, 34 people whose lives they basically ended with this false promise of hope. And so he wants to give them something that will, I mean, it's not really revenge, he says, but John, I do feel like it's a little bit of revenge. Come on. But it's about giving them an opportunity to, you know, see the light and really appreciate their lives and do good things with it. Obviously, most of them don't make it, which is what I expected. The one person that does make it is probably the worst person. And did she learn a lesson? I don't think so. I mean, she made it though, so maybe she did. Maybe we'll see her later in the Saw franchise. I don't know. It's just when we get to that part of the movie where it's just trap after trap, you know what's going to happen. And it's not, it loses all elements of being compelling. The fact as well that these traps have a lot of steps to them makes them less interesting to me, because it's just so involved. It's like, how are you even, it just sounds so ridiculous. Like, how is this person even supposed to get out of this? Like, the first trap starts it off by being probably, I would say, the most brutal one, which is in the final sequence. Anyways, we'll talk about the earlier traps in a minute. Talk about the story, we'll talk about the earlier traps in a second. But for this one, with the Geely saw and with the having to suck out the bone marrow, if you will, I think I can say those things. That is a lot of steps, you know? It's like 1, remove leg, 2, do this other thing, 3, put it and weigh it. It's like, you have 3 minutes. You better start right away. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. Even if you start right away, I don't know if you're going to make it. Also, the whole time, you know, this getting closer on you, that's going to make it harder for you to even do the thing to begin with. So you're set up to fail. And I feel like so many of them, these characters were set up to fail. And the fact that there's so many steps, it's like, just make it simple. Just, like, I also was thinking back to even Amanda's, you know, test. And her test was literally this guy who is dead, who isn't dead, but, you know, that's what Jigsaw said. You have to get the keys, like, out of him, which is already a lot, especially when you consider he's not dead. So you have to do that. And she had a pretty tight time constraint, but I actually thought that one was suspenseful. It's simple. I can't believe Amanda's setting up these people for their tests and being like, yeah, this seems fair. Like, how is this fair? Like, you didn't even have to harm your own self. You had the threat of that, but you didn't have to, you know, harm yourself directly. So that part just felt weird. I think the premise for the movie is really good. I like the idea of going back in time between Saw 1 and 2. I do think it's weird that John is so sick in this. I mean, I guess he's really sick in Saw 2, but he lives till Saw 3. So anyways, well, barely. But yeah, so the idea with going back in time with John to a story where he had this sort of sense of hope, where he was almost ready to like leave being Jigsaw and just move on with his life because of this, and then because he finds out he gets scammed, he gets pulled back in. I think that's all really compelling. And I think the idea of going after these like hoax, these people that are pulling scams, especially in a world where there's so many scam artists out there today, it feels really relevant, and I thought that was a good premise. I think the earlier traps are interesting because we don't really know what's going to happen. It feels more suspenseful. I mean, I will say the guy that has the the explosive devices like in his arms, I didn't think he was gonna make it, but then he did. And that's the interesting thing, is like, I thought I knew it was gonna happen, and then there was a moment in there where I had to like look, because I looked at the beginning, then I looked away, and then there was a moment where I was like, wait, maybe he will make it, or maybe he'll at least like get one arm. And that surprised me. So that was good. It was exciting. The other one with the sort of what if trap, which I thought was a really cool premise, and I kind of want like a whole what if Saw story now, with just John looking around being like, what if I put this person in a trap? What would that look like? Based on sort of what they're doing. That was interesting too, because I felt like that trap was actually doable. I mean, he didn't make it out, but it was a great trap. And it's simple, right? It's just fingers, because you got sticky fingers, and then, you know, you'll lose your eyes. You know what I mean? And it's also like two sort of sensorial based things, like your hand, your touch, your grab, all of that, versus your sight. Cool. That was easy. And it also looked really cool. I liked the design for it. So those traps I really liked. And then we got to the end, and the traps at the end were kind of crazy. And then the other thing that I would say that I kind of touched on is just there's moments, the moment that we talked about, that Duck and I talked about this after. And we were talking about the moment where one of the characters, I don't remember her name, I'm gonna have to look it up. That's the other thing, is like these characters didn't stick in my brain as much as some other movies. I will say Gabriella really stood out to me, actually. Gabriella was really good. And the Dr. Peterson. And obviously I love Amanda in this movie. I think Amanda's amazing. Probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. I just love her character. I think her character is so crazy. When Valentina, we're showing, you know, oh, Valentina isn't who she says she is. So she is this woman of the night. And I was like, one, why do we have to make it this? Two, what are we saying about Mexico right now? And I know this would be like Mexico, I guess, in 2004, but it still felt very like just stereotypical. And I know it's Saw. I understand. But I can still expect more, friends. I can still expect more, I think. You know? I was hoping for a little bit more. So Valentina is this woman of the night, and she is, you know, trying to get money out of this guy, and then this guy basically, you know, is on her, and Amanda saves her, and then obviously takes her. So it doesn't really save her, because then she puts her in this worse situation, I would say. Although neither of those situations is good. They're both terrible. So when that was happening, I was like, okay, why is this happening? Like, why are we putting this in the movie? Is this going somewhere? Is it going to be like, oh, I see that, you know, Valentina has it tough, so like maybe we're going to give her a break? No. That's just there. I don't know why that's there. It just felt, to me, it was like triggering in a way that I didn't need it to be there. It didn't add to the film. It just felt like it was there for the shock factor. Same at the end. The twist of this movie. So the twist of this movie, I kind of saw coming, but I thought it could go one of two ways. And I thought the one way that it could go is it could go the way of John has lost control, or John is still in control, and the twist will be he's been in control the whole time. And I thought, well, maybe John has actually lost control, and that interested me, and I had to watch. The final trap that we get with him and Carlos having to be on the boards, going back and forth. I thought maybe this is part of it. But then as soon as it was like, oh, we're going to put two people in it, I was like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Because there'd be no second person for the doctor. So probably John is still in control. And then it lost the excitement to me. It was like, oh, okay, so John's probably still in control. And then it was true. And I just saw the twist coming. I think it was still a pretty okay twist. It was still pretty good. But I just wanted that twist to be more. I thought it'd be more interesting if John actually lost control and had to regain it. And we had to watch him play one of his own games. Like, that would be super interesting. But that's not what we did. Also bringing Carlos into this. I don't know why they felt that was necessary. I mean, I guess based on the story and the fact that Carlos is in on it, I get it. But that was also upsetting to me, and I really didn't like that. And I know these movies are supposed to make me feel uncomfortable, but there's just lines that I feel like you don't always need to cross. Also, friends, this movie was made for $13 million, so our budget has expanded a lot from the early days. Now, granted, $13 million probably doesn't take you as far these days as 1.2 in 2004, but I digress. That was the thing that I also was just not a fan of. I just think of other movies that kind of do similar stuff, right? So we have things like Evil Dead Rise, which is another movie that is in a franchise, Evil Dead. I love the Evil Dead franchise. And I feel like every time we get a new movie, it's actually doing something interesting for me, where terrible things that happen, like, I think have purpose for the most part. Things that I don't expect happen. And that is a movie where the way that it was shot, the way that it was cut, the way the story is told, although there were terrible things happening that I didn't want to see, it was very hard for me to look away. I could look away for a bit, but I was usually brought right back into it because I wanted to know what would happen, because I wanted to see if people would make it, because I actually believed that it could be possible. Even though I knew everyone's going to become a Deadite in that movie. I knew it. And yet I still was rooting for those people. In this movie, I was just like, well, I guess that's that. That person's gone. The only person that I thought might get out of it was the doctor. And I mean, she does survive. I did think it was weird with the whole twist where she basically reveals that she knew that John was Jigsaw the whole time. I'm sorry, how do you know that? Excuse me? How do you know? Where could you explain that to me? Because I would like to see the documents. I would like to see the research. And I just felt like, where are we going with her character? She survives. Is she going to be relevant? Is she someone else in this franchise that I just don't know? I don't think so, but no, I don't think so. I'm going to look it up right now. But I'm assuming she's going to come back and maybe she'll be like a new Jigsaw or something like that because she survives. Yeah, she just appears in Saw X, so. But she is smart. She's callous. She has what it takes to survive, you know? But not in a way that I think is going to shape her into a sympathetic killer. So if we do bring her back, what's the point? What's the point is basically how I feel about a lot of the movie. I do think if you love the Saw franchise, you will like this movie. And I think it does a good job of doing Saw well. I think if you were hoping for some more of the classic vibes, it delivers a bit. But ultimately, there's a lot of cool pieces in this that just don't come together for me to make a super gratifying horror movie. I prefer something like Evil Dead Rise or Bodies, Bodies, Bodies to Saw X or Saw 10, personally. But that's my take. I would like to say that I'm still going to keep this one, I think, at a 3 out of 5 for me. I still think it was pretty good. I still think it's worth seeing. And especially if you love gore, I think you're really going to appreciate this movie. However, Uptown Duck would like to change his rating from 3 out of 5 saw blades to 2 out of 5 saw blades. After thinking about it, he was like less impressed with this one. However, it is doing well, and I'm glad the reviews are doing well for it. And I'm sad that I don't completely agree with everything, but it's good. It's not bad. It's just not great. And there's so many things in this that feel like it could have been great. And maybe the fact that I watched Saw 1 before I went to go see it was a bad idea because it just made me compare it. I was hoping this movie was going to be more of a standalone movie, and I don't think it is. I think this is for people that love the Saw franchise, and for people that are just walking into this, I don't know if it's going to be for them. But let me know your thoughts. If you've seen it, if you're a big fan of the Saw franchise, or if you are not, and this was kind of your first experience, or you're just getting into it now, what were your thoughts about it? I really want to hear from people that aren't into Saw as much and hear what they think. And from people that are into Saw and hear what they think about this one. I think they're going to like this one. All right, that's all I have. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay nerdy, friends.